Hare Krishna, everybody. Welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here in the live studios in Hythe, just next to Folkestone in Kent. They call it the Haven in the Anglo-Saxon language. Hythe means haven. So this little flat that we're staying in has become a haven as we read more and more of the Caitanya-caritämrta cover to cover. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had a very high opinion of the Caitanya-caritämrta, although he knew all the scriptures. He was like an encyclopedia of knowledge, shastric knowledge, and all kinds of knowledge actually. One of the greatest astrologers, translated the Surya Siddhanta and Suryadanta Shirmani. So, yeah, he was very, very learned, but he had a high opinion of Caitanya-caritämrta, as did Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Srila Prabhupada. He called it the perfect Shastra. So here's what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had to say. In due course, Mahäprabhu, devastating floods, will inundate the entire universe. If you attempt to survive by swimming in that deluge, then do not neglect to take hold of Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. Or, if you cannot hold all three, then release Bhagavad Gita. If necessary, you may also relinquish Srimad Bhagavatam. But under no circumstances release your hold on Sri Caitanya-caritämrta. For if this one book remains, then the flood can do no actual damage. Because after it has subsided, the message of Shastra can be revived from Sri Caitanya-caritämrta alone, it being the essence of all Shastra. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya Jai Nityananda Jai Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhaktavinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhaktavinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Goda Bhakta Vrinda. So we're traveling now with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He came to the river Godavari, and there, by chance, he met Rämänanda Roy. And they met, and their ecstatic love awakened, because Rämänanda Roy is Vishaka in Goloka Vrindavan, and Lord Chaitanya is Radha and Krishna together. This is the most confidential servant, Vishaka, of Radharani and Krishna. And so they met, and they amazed all the different personalities who came with Rämänanda Roy, because he was the governor of Madras, big guy, but he considered himself a Shudra. And Lord Chaitanya embraced him, and they both fell down in ecstasy. And the brahmanas who were there were completely amazed. And then at the end, the time came for them to part, and they made a meeting, and now Lord Chaitanya is accepted an invitation from a qualified brahmana. We begin with text 54 of chapter 8 of Madhya-lila. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then went to the house of a brahmana who had invited him, and took his lunch there. When the evening of that day arrived, both Rämänanda Roy and the Lord were eager to meet each other again. After finishing his evening bath, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat down and waited for Rämänanda Roy to come. Then Rämänanda Roy, accompanied by one servant, came to meet him. Purport. A Vaishnava who is supposed to be advanced in spiritual understanding, be he a householder or a sannyasi, must bathe 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening. When one is engaged in the service of the deity, he must especially follow the principles of the Padma Purana and take regular baths. He should also, after bathing, decorate his body with the 12 tilaks. Text 56. Rämänanda Roy approached Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and offered his respectful obeisances, and the Lord embraced him. Then they began to discuss Krishna in a secluded place. Purport. The word rahakstane, in a secluded place, is very significant. Talks about Krishna and his pastimes, especially his pastimes in Vrindavan and his dealings with the gopis, are all very confidential. They are not subject matter for public discussion, because those who have no understanding of the transcendental nature of Krishna's pastimes always commit great offenses, thinking Krishna to be an ordinary human being and the gopis ordinary girls. Following the principle of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who never discussed the dealings between Krishna and the gopis publicly, devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement are enjoined not to discuss the pastimes of Lord Krishna in Vrindavan in public. For the general public, Sankirtan is the most effective method to awaken Krishna consciousness. If possible, one should discuss the principles enunciated in the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu followed this principle very strictly and discussed the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita with learned scholars like Sarvabhauma, Bhattacharya, and Prakashananda Saraswati. However, he taught the principles of the Bhakti cult to students like Sanatana Goswami and Rupa Goswami, and he discussed with Sri Rämänanda Roy the topmost devotional dealings between Krishna and the gopis. For the general populace, he performed Sankirtan very vigorously. We must also follow these principles in preaching Krishna consciousness all over the world. Text 57. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered Rämänanda Roy, recite a verse from the revealed scriptures concerning the ultimate goal of life. Rämänanda replied, if one executes the prescribed duties of his social position, he awakens his original Krishna consciousness. Purport. In this connection, Sri Ramanujacharya states in the Vedartha Sangraha that devotional service is naturally very dear to the living entity. Indeed, it is its life's goal. This devotional service is supreme knowledge, or Krishna consciousness, and it brings detachment from all material activity. In the transcendental position, a living being can perfectly acknowledge the superiority of serving the Supreme Lord. The devotees attain the Supreme Lord only by devotional service. Having such knowledge, one engages in his occupational duty, and that is called Bhakti Yoga. By performing Bhakti Yoga, one can rise to the platform of pure devotional service. A great saint, the father of Srila Vyasadeva, Parashara Muni, has specifically mentioned that devotional service to the Lord can ultimately be awakened in human society by the discharge of duties in accordance with the Varnashram Dharma system. The Supreme Personality of Godhead instituted Varnashram Dharma to give human beings a chance to return home, back to Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, who is known in the Bhagavad Gita as Purushottama, is the greatest of all personalities. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, who is known in the Bhagavad Gita as Purushottama, the greatest of all personalities, personally came and declared that the institution of Varnashram Dharma was founded by him. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 4.13, Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam Gunakarma Vibhagashaha Tasya Kartaram Abhimam Vidyakartaram Avyayam. Elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita 18:45-46, the Lord says, Sway Sway Karmanyabharita Sangsiddhim Labate Naraha Swakarma Niratak Siddhim Yata Vindati Yach Tach Trinu Yatak Pravitir Bhutanam Yena Sarvamidang Tatam Swakarmana Tamarbhyarcha Siddhim Vindati Manavaha. Human society should be divided into 4 divisions: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. And everyone should always engage in his occupational duty. The Lord says that those engaged in their occupational duty can attain perfection simply by rendering devotional service to the Lord while executing their particular duty. Actually, the modern ideal of a classless society can be introduced only by Krishna consciousness. Let men perform their occupational duty, and let them give their profits for the service of the Lord. In other words, one can attain the perfection of life by discharging one's occupational duty and employing the results in the service of the Lord. This method is confirmed by great personalities like Bodhayana, Tanka, Dramida, Guhadev, Kapardi, and Bharuchi. It is also confirmed by the Vedanta Sutra. Text 58. Varnashramat charavata purushena padak puman vishnur aradyate panta nanyat tat toshakaranam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped by the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of Varna and Ashrama. There is no other way to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One must be situated in the institution of the 4 Varnas and Ashramas. Purport. This is a quotation from the Vishnu Purana 389. As stated by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Amrita Pravaha Bhashya, the purport is that one can realize life's perfection simply by satisfying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is also confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.13. Atak bhumbir dvija shreshta varnashrama vibhaga shaha sunushthitasya dharmasya sangsiddhir haritoshanam. O best among the twice born, it is therefore concluded that the highest perfection one can achieve by discharging the duties prescribed for one's own occupation according to caste divisions and orders of life is to please the Personality of Godhead. Every man should perform his occupational duty in the light of his particular tendency. According to his abilities, one should accept a position in the Varnashrama institution. The divisions of Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are natural divisions within society. Indeed, everyone has a prescribed duty according to the Varnashram Dharma. One who properly execute their prescribed duties live peacefully and are not disturbed by material conditions. The spiritual orders, Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas, are called ashramas. if one executes his prescribed duty in both the social and spiritual orders, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied. If one neglects his duties, however, he becomes a transgressor and a candidate for a hellish condition. Actually, we see that different people are engaged in different ways. Therefore, Therefore, there must be divisions according to work. To attain perfection, therefore, there must be divisions according to work. To attain perfection, one must make devotional service the center of life. In this way, one can awaken his natural instincts by work, association, and education. One should accept the varnashram divisions by qualification, not by birth. Unless this system is introduced, human activities cannot be systematically executed. The Brahmanas are the intellectuals who can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They are always engaged in the cultivation of knowledge. It does not matter whether one is born in India or outside India. Those who are naturally very heroic and who tend to rule over others are called Kshatriyas. Those who tend to produce food by agricultural methods, protect cows and other animals, and engage in trade are called Vaishyas, or merchants. Those who are not sufficiently intelligent to be Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, or Vaishyas are required to serve a master and are called Shudras. Thus, everyone can engage in the service of the Lord and awaken his natural Krishna consciousness. If a society does not function according to such natural divisions, the social orders become degraded. The conclusion is that the scientific method of varnashram dharma should be adopted by society. Text 59. The Lord replied, "This is external. You would better tell me of some other means." Rämänanda replied, "To offer the results of one's activities to Krishna is the essence of all perfection." Text 60. Yat karoshi, yadishnashi, yad jahosi, dadasi yat, yat tapasyasi konteya, tat kadushva madarpanam. Rämänanda Roy continued, "My dear son of Kunti, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer in sacrifice, whatever you give in charity, and whatever austerities you perform, all the results of such activities should be offered to me, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead." Purport. The Lord has said that the varnashram dharma is not properly executed in this age of Kali. Therefore, he ordered Rämänanda Roy to go further into the matter. Rämänanda replied with this verse from the Bhagavad Gita 9:27, which instructs that while remaining in the system of varnashram dharma, one may offer the results of his activities to Lord Krishna in loving service. Naturally, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahäprabhu was asking Rämänanda Roy about the execution of devotional service. Rämänanda Roy first enunciated the principle of varnashram dharma in consideration of materialistic people. However, this conception is not transcendental. As long as one is in the material world, he must follow the principles of varnashram dharma. But devotional service is transcendental. The system of varnashram dharma refers to the three modes of material nature, but transcendental devotional service is on the absolute platform. Sri Chaitanya Mahäprabhu belongs to the spiritual world, and his methods for propagating the Sankirtan movement are also imported from the spiritual world. Srila Narottam Das Thakur has sung Golokera Premadhana Harinama Sankirtana Ratina Janmila Keni Toy. This states that the Sankirtan movement has nothing to do with this material world. It is imported from the spiritual world, Goloka Vrindavan. Narottam Das Thakur laments that mundane people do not take this Sankirtan movement seriously. Considering the position of devotional service in the Sankirtan movement, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu deemed the system of Varnashram Dharma to be material, although it aims at elevation to the spiritual platform. However, the Sankirtan movement can raise one immediately to the spiritual platform. Consequently, it is said that Varnashrama Dharma is external, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested Rämänanda Roy to proceed deeper into the matter and uncover the spiritual platform. Sometimes materialists consider Lord Vishnu a material conception. Impersonalists think that above Lord Vishnu is the impersonal Brahman. The impersonalists misunderstand the worship of Lord Vishnu. They worship Lord Vishnu to merge into his body. In order that Vishnu Aradhana not be misunderstood, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested that Sri Rämänanda Roy proceed further and clear up the issue. Rämänanda Roy quoted the verse from the Bhagavad Gita stating that the results of one's occupational duty may be offered to Lord Vishnu or Krishna. In Srimad Bhagavatam 128, it is also said, Dharma sanushtitak pumsang vishwaksena kathasuyaha notpadayet yadiratim shama evahi kevalam. If one executes the occupational duties of Varnashram Dharma, but does not cultivate his dormant Krishna consciousness, his activities are futile. His occupation simply becomes unnecessary labor. Text 61. This is also external, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said. Please proceed and speak further on this matter. Rämänanda Roy replied, to give up one's occupational duties in the Varnashram system is the essence of perfection. Purport. A Brahmana may renounce his family and accept sannyas. Others, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, may also give up their families and take to Krishna consciousness. Such renunciation is called karma tyaga. By such renunciation, the Supreme Personality of Godhead is satisfied. In contrast, the process of renouncing the results of one's activities by offering these results to Krishna is not considered uncontaminated because, although such a process implies that one recognizes Krishna as the Supreme Person, it still involves one in activities on the material platform. Since such activities are within the material universe, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu considered them external. To correct this, Rämänanda Roy recommended that one take to the renounced order of life in order to transcend material activities. This is supported by the following verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 11.11.32. Agyayaivam gunan doshan maya dishdan api swakan dharman santyajyak sarvan mam bhajet chatasatamaha. Rämänanda Roy continued, occupational duties are described in the religious scriptures. If one analyzes them, he can fully understand their qualities and faults, and then give them up completely to render service under the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such a person is considered a first-class man. 63. Sarvadharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshayishami ma shuchaha. As stated in Scripture, after giving up all kinds of religious and occupational duties, if you come to me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and take shelter, I will give you protection from all of life's sinful reactions. Do not worry. Purport. In this connection, Srila Raghunath Das Goswami instructs in his book Manak Shiksha 2, Nadharmam Nadharmam Shrutigana Niruktam Kilakaru Rajiradha Krishna Prachura Paricharyam Ihatanu. He has thus enjoined that we should not perform religious or irreligious activities as prescribed in the Vedas. The best course is to engage always in the service of Lord Krishna and Radharani. That is the perfection of everything in this life. Similarly, in Srimad Bhagavatam 4:29-46, it is said by Narada Muni, Yada yasya nagrinati bhagavan atma bhavitaha najahati matim loke vede cha parinishtitam. When one actually takes to the loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he gives up all duties in the material world, as well as all duties prescribed by the Vedic literatures. In this way, one is fixed in the service of the Lord. Text 64. After hearing Rämänanda Roy speak in this way, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again rejected his statement and said, "Go ahead and say something more." Rämänanda Roy then replied, "Devotional service mixed with empiric knowledge is the essence of perfection." Purport. Devotional service mixed with non-Vedic speculative knowledge is certainly not pure devotional service. Therefore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, in his Anubhashya, preaches that self-realization following the execution of ritualistic ceremonies is in the neutral stage between liberation and conditioned life. It is a place beyond this material world, in the river Viraja, where the three modes of material nature are subdued or neutralized in the unmanifest stage. However, the spiritual world is a manifestation of spiritual energy and is known as Vaikuntha Loka, the place where there is no anxiety. The material world, known as Rämänanda, is the creation of the external energy. Between the two creations, the material creation and the spiritual creation, is a river known as Viraja, as well as a place known as Brahmaloka. Virajanadi and Brahmaloka are shelters for living entities disgusted with material life and inclined to impersonal existence by way of denying material variegatedness. Since these places are not situated in the Vaikuntha Lokas, or the spiritual world, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu proclaims them to be external. In the Brahmaloka, in Virajanadi, one cannot conceive of the Vaikuntha Lokas. Brahmaloka and Virajanadi are also attained after difficult austerities, but in these realms there is no understanding of the Supreme Personality loving service. Without such spiritual knowledge, simple detachment from material conditions is but another side of material existence. From the spiritual point of view, it is all external. When Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu rejected this proposal, Rämänanda Roy suggested that devotional service based on philosophy and logic is a more advanced position. Therefore, he quoted the following verse from the Bhagavad Gita, 1854, text 65. Brahma bhutak prasanatma nashochiti nakankshyati samap sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labhate bharam. Rämänanda Roy continued, according to the Bhagavad Gita, one who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the Supreme Brahman and becomes fully joyful. He never laments or desires to have anything. He is equally disposed toward every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. Purport. In this verse from the Bhagavad Gita, it is said that a person who accepts the theory of monism, being always engaged in empiric philosophical discussions about spiritual life, becomes joyful and is relieved from all material lamentation and hankering. At that stage, one is equipoised. He sees all living entities as spiritual beings. After attaining this elevated stage, one can attain pure devotional service. The conclusion is that devotional service mixed with ritualistic fruitive activity is inferior to spiritual service based on empiric philosophic discussion. Text 66. After hearing this, the Lord, as usual, rejected it, considering it to be external devotional service. He again asked Rämänanda Roy to speak further, and Rämänanda Roy replied, "Pure devotional service, without any touch of speculative knowledge, is the essence of perfection." Purport. In his Anubhashya commentary, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that the stage of devotional service mixed with speculative knowledge is also external and not within the jurisdiction of pure devotional service as practiced in the Vaikuntha Loka. As soon as there is some conception of materialistic thought, be it positive or negative, the service is not spiritual. It may be free from material contamination, but because there is mental speculation, the devotional service is not pure and freed from the contamination of material life. A living entity who wants to be completely pure must be above this material conception. The negation of material existence does not necessarily mean spiritual existence. After material existence is negated, spiritual existence, namely Satchidananda, still may not be manifested. Until one comes to the stage of actually understanding one's eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord, he cannot enter into spiritual life. Spiritual life means becoming detached from material life and engaging in the loving service of the Lord. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu therefore asked Rämänanda Roy to explain something transcendental to devotional service mixed with speculative knowledge. A pure devotee is completely surrendered to the lotus feet of the Lord, and only by his love does he conquer Krishna, who cannot be conquered by anyone. Krishna always stands victorious over everything. No one can conquer him. One can attain the stage of pure devotion simply by fully surrendering. One can attain the stage of pure devotion simply by fully surrendering. This is next corroborated by Srimad Bhagavatam 10.14.3, wherein Lord Brahma, defeated by the potency of Sri Krishna, fully surrendered unto the Lord. Text 67. Jnane priyasam udapasyo namanta eva jivanti san mukaritam bhavadiya bharatam stane stitak shutikatam tanuvan manobir ye prayasho jita jito pyasitrais trilokyan. Rämänanda Roy continued, Lord Brahma said, My dear Lord, those devotees who have thrown away the impersonal conception of the absolute truth and have therefore abandoned discussing empiric philosophical truths should hear from self-realized devotees about your holy name, form, pastimes, and qualities. They should completely follow the principles of devotional service and remain free from illicit sex, gambling, intoxication, and animal slaughter. Surrendering themselves fully with body, words, and mind, they can live in any ashram or social status. Indeed, you are conquered by such persons, although you are always unconquerable. Text 38. At this point, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, This is all right, but still you can speak more on the subject. Rämänanda Roy then replied, Ecstatic love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the essence of all perfection. Amrita. Purport. In his Amrita Pravaha Bhashya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur summarizes the conversation up to this point, where Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says to Rämänanda Roy, Eho hai age kaha ar. This is the process accepted in devotional service. But there is something more than this. Therefore, please explain what is beyond. Simply executing the duties of all varnas and ashramas is not as good as offering all the results of one's activities to the Lord. When one gives up all fruitive activity and fully surrenders unto the Lord, he attains Swadharma Tyaga, wherein he abandons the social order and takes to the renounced order. That is certainly better. However, better than the renounced order is cultivation of knowledge mixed with devotional service. Yet all these activities are external to the activities of the spiritual world. There is no touch of pure devotional service in them. Pure devotional service cannot be attained by empiric philosophy, nor can perfection be attained simply by good association. Devotional service by self-realization is a different subject matter. It is untouched by fruitive activity, in which one surrenders the results of one's activities to the Lord, and also by the process of abandoning one's prescribed duties and accepting the renounced order of life. Such devotional service is also situated on a higher platform than that of empiric philosophical speculation, with a mixture of bhakti. This is verified by Srila Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.1.11. Anya bilashita shunyam jnana karma janavritam anukul yena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir utama. One should render transcendental, loving service to the Supreme Lord Krishna favorably and without desire for material profit or gain through fruitive activities or philosophical speculation. That is called pure devotional service. Devotional activities, however, sometimes appear to be impure in the neophyte stage, but in the mature stage they are completely pure or free from material activity. Therefore, Rämänanda Roy replied that after hearing the last statement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Prema Bhakti, Sarva Sadhya Sar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu actually accepted this verse, Jnane Priyasam, as the basic principle of perfection. One has to practice this principle in order to make further progress. When further progress is actually made, one comes to the platform of ecstatic loving service to the Lord. This first stage is technically called sadhana bhakti, or devotional service in practice. The result of sadhana bhakti must be ecstatic love, attachment for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is also called prema bhakti. In the neophyte stage, sadhana bhakti includes faith, association with devotees, and practicing devotional service. Thus one is freed from all unwanted things. One then becomes fixed in devotional service and increases his desire to act in devotional service. Thus one becomes attached to the Lord and his devotional service. 69. Rämänanda Roy continued, as long as there is hunger and thirst within the stomach, varieties of food and drink make one feel very happy. Similarly, when the Lord is worshipped with pure love, the various activities performed in the course of that worship awaken transcendental bliss in the heart of the devotee. Text 70. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati Kriyatam Yadikuto Nalabhyate Tatralolyam Apimulyam Ekalam Janma Koti Sukritayar Nalabhyate. Pure devotional service and Krishna consciousness cannot be had even by pious activity in hundreds and thousands of lives. It can be attained only by paying one price, that is, intense greed to obtain it. If it is available somewhere, one must purchase it without delay. Purport. The previous two verses are included in the Padjavali 13-14, an anthology compiled by Srila Rupa Goswami. Verse 69 refers to devotional service in faith, and verse 70 refers to devotional service rendered out of intense greed. The first is devotional service rendered in accordance with the regulative principles, and the second refers to spontaneous loving service of the Lord without extraneous endeavor. Henceforward, the basic principle underlying the talks between Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Rämänanda Roy will be spontaneous service to the Lord. The regulative principles, according to the injunctions of the Shastras, are necessary insofar as one's original dormant Krishna consciousness is not spontaneously awakened. An example of spontaneous action is the flowing of rivers into the ocean. Nothing can stop this flow of water. Similarly, when one's dormant Krishna consciousness is awakened, it spontaneously flows to the lotus feet of Krishna without impediment. Whatever will be spoken henceforth by Rämänanda Roy based on spontaneous love, will be agreeable to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the Lord will ask him more and more about this subject. And we'll stop here. Hare Krishna. We learned all about the process of devotional service previous to the spontaneous platform. Hare Krishna. So in this is a very, very important section of the Caitanya-caritämrta, because it takes us from materialist activity to in between materialistic activity, spiritual activity, the giving up of material activity, the engaging in philosophical exercises and discussions based on what's the difference between spiritual and material worlds, renunciation, renunciation free from these speculative ideas, and pure devotional service, which begins from hearing and chanting, giving up speculation, and simply hearing and chanting the philosophy and the pastimes, especially of the Lord, spoken by authorized sources, pure devotees of the Lord. And from now on, we'll be delving into the actual discussions of the spiritual world and the activities of the spiritual world and what goes on there and how one can become qualified to enter into that highest level of devotional service. We should close these windows. It's starting to get cool. Okay, I'm handing it over to the assembled sages to relish, remunerate on the subject. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Everyone is flabbergasted. They're gobsmacked. They're laying on the floor, rolling around, gurgling. Well, kind of sobering, isn't it? And it's interesting how, the Bhagavad Gita takes us gradually through the different phases of development from material to spiritual life. Very interesting how he quotes this is a very important section for us to actually learn and learn to repeat, and especially in our own words for preaching purposes. It was also I will start off the reflections. I always am, but this time I was particularly impressed by this idea that Lord Chaitanya never talked about the activities of the spiritual world in public places. It's happening all over. But it's not actually the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He only talked about those subject matters with very, very confidential devotees, and never in public, not in public programs. Public programs are meant to discuss these things that we just heard from Rämänanda Roy to Lord Chaitanya and his inquiries and answers. And particularly for the general public, Harinam Sankirtan, vigorous Harinam Sankirtan. And Prabhupada developed this masterful genius of Nam Sankirtan and book the distribution of the transcendental knowledge through his transcendental books, which he called Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, also called the Brihad Mridanga. Because how far can the Mridanga be heard when it's played in Nam Sankirtan? Block, maybe a little more, but the books, when they go out, they can go anywhere, and they bring the transcendental sound of kirtan into the homes of people. Can travel anywhere. They cross continents. Sometimes when we used to distribute books in the airports in America in the 70s, we would meet somebody in the international airport that had gotten a book from the airport in the country he had left, and he came and he got another book from us sometimes. So it's a very special way. And anyway, spreading of Krishna consciousness in such a deeply materialistic societies of the developed West especially is extremely difficult, and no one should consider that it can happen very quickly. It will take generations of persons becoming qualified through the touch of these books, through the touch of contact with the devotees who distribute them, and the Krishna consciousness movement in all their activities, because all the activities of the Krishna consciousness movement are transcendental by nature, because they're all directly serving Lord Chaitanya's desire. That's why we get together every day and discuss the scriptures and chant together and say prayers together and worship the spiritual master and the great personalities together. These are activities of pure devotional service. They're not material at all. And even the activities that we do to clean and to cook and to purchase and to manage and to write and to edit and to do all the things that we do, it's all directly pure devotional service, because it's directly engaging our body, mind, and words directly in the service of the Lord. In other words, Lord Chaitanya, and Prabhupada took Lord Chaitanya's teachings and brought it into the Western world and, transplanted it into the material culture. This is a very difficult thing to do. Very difficult thing to do. Only by the empowerment of Krishna can one do such a thing. So we are so blessed. Hare Krishna. I'm taking over all the time that we're supposed to hear reflections from our sages out there in cyberspace, but nobody seems to be inclined today. Oh, something. Abhaya's found something. A little nugget to mine.
From Rati Manjari.
Rati, Hare Krishna.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. Should we understand this to be like a staged conversation in which the Lord wants us to know these stages, and Rämänanda Roy assisted him? Or is this conversation guided by Yogamaya? Or is this not very relevant for us to know?
Well, later on in the conversation, Rämänanda Roy acknowledges that he is just like a stringed instrument, and Lord Chaitanya is plucking the strings, and he's speaking. But that only comes out a little later in the conversation, and at one point, Rämänanda Roy starts to speak things that he knows nothing about. And he knows more about these subject matters than anyone. Even Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya admitted that he used to laugh at him, thinking he was a crazy person. But once he became enlightened by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and awakened in devotional service, then he realized that actually Ramananda Roy is transcendentally situated, and he's living in the spiritual world. But still, as advanced as he was, Lord Chaitanya asked him questions beyond what he knew, and still he spoke them. So it depends on what stage of the conversation you're listening to, and what stage you're qualified to hear and properly understand. But in a general sense, yes, we should consider this an explanation of the beginning and the development of spiritual understanding through the different processes of materialistic activity, and which means varnashram dharma without tinge of devotional service, and the daivi varnashram, which means when it's done for the pleasure of Krishna, by giving the fruits to Krishna. And in this way we can learn to live in the material world and at the same time stay connected to the spiritual world and advance towards spiritual perfection. And then these are various stages that one goes through as he progresses through the Bhagavad Gita. That's what really happened up until now. It's the stages of advancement that are explained to Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. And not just to Arjuna, to all of us. Everyone is on a specific stage of development along the stairway of devotional life, and therefore certain parts of the Gita will be more easily understood by us than others. And as we keep hearing, and as perhaps Prabhupada said, the process is to hear again and again and again and again. That's why I've devoted myself to this service of hearing the Gita, the Bhagavatam, Caitanya-caritämrta, all the way through, cover to cover, again and again and again. Because this is the way forward. We're not scholars. Hardly anyone is a scholar who can memorize all these verses and put them together and learn how to discuss them in a very erudite way, very scholastic way. Hardly anybody's like that. But if we continue to hear from proper persons, and Prabhupada is a proper person to hear from, definitely, then by reading his purports and trying to understand, and then living our lives, gradually applying the thoughts, and then the activities, and then our words, to teach this, then we become guru. Remember, he met the Kurma Brahmana, who was a householder. He stayed with him for a few days, and the Kurma Brahmana wanted to go with him, and he said, "No, you're going to stay here. I want to go with you and spread Krishna consciousness all over the world." And he said, "No, you're going to stay right here in your village and become a guru." He didn't want him to just tag along and watch him and worship him, although that's not a bad thing to do, of course. Lord Chaitanya, worshipping him is pure devotional service. But that was not Lord Chaitanya's mission. He just met ordinary people along the street or along the places where he went. And he told them, okay, you watched, you saw, here's the Gita, now you teach it to your fellow people and become guru. He didn't say, first of all, learn who you are in the spiritual world and talk pure, spontaneous love of God between Krishna and the gopis. He didn't say that. So this teaching of Ramananda Roy through, or Lord Chaitanya through Ramananda Roy rather, is teaching us the various stages of advancement in devotional life. And as we realize, as we go along and realize, then we'll understand. And then we should teach it to others according to our capacity and increase the number of devotees. That is Lord Chaitanya's movement. And he's demonstrating exactly how to do it within the context of that culture and that cultural situation 500 years ago in India. And now Srila Prabhupada, through his transcendental genius, has taught us how to do that within the context of the concrete jungles and parks and wherever we go, door to door, different cultural events and where people gather. Of course, they're not gathering so much anymore. Now through the internet, same. I hope I answered the question. I'm kind of rambling. I feel like a little rambling now. I'll stop here. Hare Krishna.
Next is something from Dayanitai.
Dayanitai Haribo.
He says, Hare Krishna, dear Srila Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Please accept my obeisance.
Jaya, glory to Prabhupada.
I am wondering if the dialogue was written down by Lord Chaitanya's servant who traveled with him at the time.
Yes.
Or how...
And then it was reported back to Swarup Damodar. And then Swarup Damodar compiled all of the activities of Lord Chaitanya.
And then something more from Rati Manjari.
And it could be also that Lord Chaitanya explained things that happened, you know, back when he came back and talked to his intimate associates. That's also possible.
Rati says, Dayanitai says, clear, thank you. And Rati Manjari says, you said that the intimate pastimes of the Lord should not be spoken of in public places. If we happen to be in a place or audience in which this happens, that we are unexpectedly exposed to hearing Radha Krishna-lila, what could the effect on us be? And what would be the right thing for us to do?
It depends on our situation, how qualified we are. If you're still attached to the material world and you hear those topics being discussed publicly as an entertainment or as a, like the professional readers in India, they tend to go right to the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. They don't go like Prabhupada taught us to go gradually, verse by verse by verse by verse through the Bhagavatam. And then, you know, if the person who is speaking it is contaminated with ulterior motives, if he's doing it as a business, you know, to collect funds and as they do in India, and then maintain his family through that business, then the chances of being contaminated by the sound, by the contaminated sound that comes out, even though it's about Krishna, can poison us and lead us into thinking that we can enter into that topic without becoming actually qualified. Qualified means free from sinful activities and free from material attachment, and the greed to live like in these public places where they go. That doesn't mean in the Bhagavatam class, of course, when we're on the 10th canto, we may talk about these things, but in a general sense, in a general way, but we don't exclusively do that. But in India, where people want to go to the Rasa-lila because it is the highest thing, and they want the highest thing, and they don't want to become qualified. Like when I was living in Govardhan, for instance, I would regularly, because I'm living right down the road from Radhakund, which is the highest transcendental place on the universe. And, during the years that I've lived there, that was a long time ago. Now I don't stay there so much, but I've regularly lived there for a very long time. I have my room there and everything. And I would meet devotees from ISKCON, and they would go, and I'd ask them what they're doing, and they obviously could see what they're doing by the way they were dressing and the way they were acting. And they would say, oh, we are now at Radhakund, and we're bathing in Radhakund every day. And see, it's right here in Prabhupada's book. And they'd pull out the Nectar of Instruction, and take the last verse or the last two verses, and where it explains that the goal is to live on the banks of the Radhakund and take a bath there every day. But, the first, second, third, fourth, all those verses are meant to be assimilated into one's character before one does that. Doesn't mean you can't hear the teachings, doesn't mean that you can't, but to dwell there and think that you can live there without being actually transcendentally situated above the modes of nature. And we saw it with my own eyes, girls living there and then having affairs and having to go out with illegitimate children, and there's all kinds of horrible things that go on there. People are taking advantage of others. That's not to say that there aren't elevated souls there. There are, but they don't do that kind of thing. They stay to themselves. They're Bhajananandis, the people who stay in Radhakund. Generally, they're Bhajananandis. And also, going up from, the professional reciters who go around and have these big pandals and have very expert musicians around them. They're very expert at, chanting the prayers and the pastimes and the Sanskrit and commenting on them. But their mood is different. Their mood is professional recitation, and the proof is that the people who come there, they get a buzz, they get a kind of, like an entertainment, and then they go back to their daily lives and nothing changes. Their lives stay exactly the same. So Prabhupada wanted us to hear the big Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam and the Caitanya-caritämrta all the way through, again and again and again. And then as we get purified by doing that, gradually we will actually spontaneously be taken to the places where we want to be, to persons that we want to associate with. It's not that those things don't exist, it's not that they're not real, it's just that we have to be very careful not to step into that realm prematurely. And what is the test? The test is whether or not our desire for material things and the material activities and our attachment to this material world is not loosened to the point where we can actually hear and chant and be genuinely attracted. So all those things depend on where we stand internally in the spiritual platform. And they're systematically described here in this discussion with Rämänanda Roy, with proper verses of the Bhagavad Gita coming up to this place where we left off. They didn't start by talking about the activities of the gopis with Krishna. That requires honesty and sincerity and the association of pure devotees who are not pretending, who are not artificially trying to dwell in places that they're not ready to dwell in. That's not to say that after 40 or 50 years of devotional service that devotees aren't ready for that, but they don't go and in public talk about those things where there's obviously people around that are not ready for it. I know we've been preaching for 48 years now, and practically here we are, we're getting these questions. And we always get these questions. We get questions about how to control the mind and how to live in this world and not fall down, and how to be strong enough to go forward, how to be strong enough to be fixed in the regulative principles, all these things. These are the kinds of things that people need, the strength, of being with persons who are fixed in the regulative principles and fixed in performing the daily duties of worshiping the deities and having our devotional program, our devotional practices, and trying to help others come to devotional service. This is the way. And generally speaking, the ones who want to go to those higher topics, they either go to a place where they're just exclusively, indulged in, then they go back to their homes and just live a regular life until the next one comes. But Prabhupada taught us how to gradually come up to the platform of being able to live in a spiritual platform, on the spiritual plane, where everything that we do is meant to help glorify Krishna and spread Krishna consciousness. That's what pleases Krishna the most. He says it in the Gita. That verse comes after Sarva Dharman Pradityaja, Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. Krishna talks about this subject matter in the 4th chapter of the Gita. Vita raga vaya krodha manmaya mam upasritaha bahavo jnana tapasa puta madbhavam agadaha. So there he introduces the concept. This is in the 4th chapter, beginning of the 4th chapter. Vita raga vaya krodha, becoming free. Vita means free. Vita raga bhaya krodha, from attachment, fear, and anger. Bahavo jnana tapasa, the austerities. Bahavo, let me see. Vita raga bhaya krodha, manmaya mamupasritaha. Being free from those things, one can mam upasrita. One can take shelter of Krishna, or those who are taking shelter of Krishna. And then bahavo, whatever jnana, knowledge we are acquiring. Bahavo jnana tapasa, and the austerities we perform. And for what reason? Puta means pure, to become purified. And for what reason? Madbhava, developing love for Krishna. That's the process in a nutshell in the very first part of the Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter. But if you read carefully the purport, then Prabhupada describes how to conceive the different obstacles that are there, the dangers, the attachments, the craziness, all the things that we have to get. When it says Vita Raga Vaya, he concentrates on that part. Vita Raga Vaya Krodha. And analyzes it in depth. So we have to put all these thoughts together, and learn them. Not just a little here and a little there, but learn how they fit together. I highly recommend Burijan's course on the Gita, where he gives a kind of overview, vision of the Gita, how it fits together. That's what it means to study the Gita properly. And this is just touching on the topics in the beginning of this conversation. Does that make any sense? Is that answering the question? And then you may say, yes, but I've been here for so long. But the thing is, we've been here for so long, but what are we actually doing? What have we actually done? We have to actually, gradually we have to become serious. And we make mistakes, and then we correct ourselves, then we go forward. And eventually, and the key in one of those purports was, it begins with full surrender. That's where it begins. It's not that we have to analyze and figure out and then surrender. We have to surrender, and then gradually all those things, all the blanks will be filled in. And they can't be filled in without surrendering to Krishna. Therefore, the Bhagavatam begins where the Bhagavad Gita leaves off. Caitanya-caritämrta, of course, there's overlapping things through all the teachings. But, the Caitanya-caritämrta then takes us into these higher topics. But properly, securely, through the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and through his association, and through watching his life unfold.
Rati Manjari says, yes, Guru Maharaj, very meaningful.
Hare Krishna. Yeah, Lord Chaitanya showed how to be a baby perfectly, how to be a little boy, how to be a young pre-youth, perfectly, how to be a student perfectly, how to be grahasta perfectly, how to be a sannyasi perfectly, and then how to go beyond sannyas to the transcendental realm completely, by first traveling and preaching and developing, liberating everyone in India practically. That's perfection. So we have to do that, but not imitate, but by following the instructions what to do, depending on what our situation is. I keep saying it to you over and over again. I think that you're perfectly situated. You have a household. You're taking care of your son. You're a single mother, true, but you're working, and the work that you do is helping others in welfare work, and that's right in the between 8 and 12 of the Gita. That's right there in the spectrum of activities that takes one to Krishna consciousness. And then you go out and you preach in the homes, and you preach in the parks, and you convince people to take prasadam and chant Hare Krishna and take books. You're perfectly situated. You're acting as a guru from the Grihastha ashram. That's what Lord Chaitanya asked the Kurma Brahmana to do. Not that you should just run away and try to be a sannyasi, which a woman can't be anyway, but take that kind of renounced lifestyle. Better you stay where you are and continue to hear and get others to hear, and that will bring you to the perfectional stage. You're not a new devotee, Rati. You've been around for a long time. You've seen a lot of things, you've heard a lot of things, you've done a lot of things, and now you're seeing the difference. My humble opinion, as your friend and mentor. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada commented, and all that in 48 years.
Yeah. It's just starting. That's what I feel like. I feel like I'm just starting. And every time I hear these books, it's new and fresh. And I don't get tired and have to go off to some higher, group that has given up these things and look back at the very movement that saved them. And they should feel eternally indebted to, because they didn't know anything before they came in especially Westerners, before they came in contact with Prabhupada's movement. And movement uplifted them and saved them. And then they get the idea that they want the higher topics. So they go and they associate with people who criticize ISKCON, and they just naturally fall into that trap, that offensive mentality. And then they fall down. And sometimes they fall down big, and it's very, very sad. So we have to stay protected by staying in the association of pure devotees, like we're doing every day, every night, chanting the Caitanya-caritämrta together and discussing it, threadbare. This is the process. And we can feel ourselves going forward. We can feel our hearts being satisfied. The restlessness is going away. And eventually we will go to the spiritual world and become qualified to associate with Krishna. And on the way we hear those things, we don't, it's the goal. It's the goal to associate with Krishna, to learn the details of the spiritual world and the Brajbasis and how Krishna plays with them and lives with them and does all the things that we do here also, but without lust, without greed, without anger, without fear. Practice. Prabhupada gave us the perfect lifestyle to practice being a devotee, organizing our lives in such a way that Krishna is always there looking at us, and we're always looking at Krishna and all of their associates, reminding us of our where we stand and what we're supposed to do. And gradually they come to life. And the atmosphere changes. And in that way we live in Vrindavan wherever we go. Create Vrindavan atmosphere wherever we go. You don't have to be a sannyasi to do that. You can be anybody and do that. Hare Krishna.
Rati says, thank you for always encouraging and guiding me. And also the 48 years were referring to Lord Chaitanya's stay on earth.
Yes.
And she says, yes, every evening your reading is lifting me up so powerfully. It's amazing.
Cheers. I can only say that since I started doing this, my taste for hearing is increasing like anything. And it's a pleasure that is beyond anything I've ever experienced. And it's accessible to anyone and everyone. It's not a personality cult. That's why everyone Chaitanya Mahaprabhu met, he gave them love from God, because he can do that. No one else can do that. Can't imitate that. But then when he enlightened them, he said, you stay here and you preach and make others do this. They can't do it to the same extent that Lord Chaitanya can, but our movement is doing it. Prabhupada did it. He spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. even though it may be a small percentage of the population yet, but still it's pervasive now. Whereas before, it wasn't, and nobody knew about Krishna. When I was growing up in America, no one knew about Krishna. Maybe a few, scholars, studying Indian philosophy or something. But even then, they didn't taste the real thing. Prabhupada always used that example that before his Gita came out, there were hundreds of translations, but nobody was becoming a devotee of Krishna. And as soon as his Gita came out, thousands of people became devotees of Krishna, pure. And that will increase more and more, as it has. When he left, there was 108 temples. Now there's more than 600 temples and projects, and a lot more than that of people who are getting together like we are and just hearing. It's spreading. And anybody who takes part in it, they also approach the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya. And as you do that, your heart becomes softened and becomes satisfied. Restlessness goes away, and we find shelter. Vidya ragavaya krodha manmaya mam upashritaha. How to take shelter of Krishna. And then there's only one thing to do, and that's to share it. That's it. That's the essence of the Krishna consciousness movement. Prabhupada explains it over and over and over and over and over again. And speaking of that, my computer's starting to ding and dong, and I have some things I have to take care of. So I will stop here, and I will thank you all for very much. I'll thank Rati Manjoy especially for her diligent and continuous questioning and delving and asking, not challenging, but sometimes difficult questions to answer. It's just elevating the course of the conversation.
So, Noel Craver?
Noel Craver, Hare Krishna, Noel.
He says, thank you for giving us the opportunity to hear each day. I love how you said the restlessness goes away and we take shelter.
Yes. The more you take shelter, the more the restlessness goes away. But then it's replaced with another kind of restlessness. A kind of restlessness that pushes us to go to Krishna. Without Krishna, we're restless. But that restlessness pushes us closer to Krishna and closer to Krishna. Whereas the restlessness of the material energy takes us away from Krishna and into material activities, material attachments. So we have to learn. And we are learning. Hare Krishna. Sri Caitanya-caritämrta ki jai. Samaveda bhakta vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. And Noel, I have your letter, and I'm way behind my letter writing because of things I've had to do here, but it's on my to-do list. It'll come soon. See you tomorrow, same time, same place, same subject matter. Hare Krishna.